Okay. Hi, everybody. Bob Schwartz here. I am really happy to be speaking with Dr. Stephen Porges, who is the author of Polyvagal Theory, who's on the cutting edge of what I would call the bottom-up approach to working with trauma. Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Bob, for inviting me.
Maybe you could give I know it's kind of hard to do, but a super cliff note version of polyvagal theory and how it's relevant for working with trauma.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, when you said it was a bottom-up approach, that's only part of the story. It's also a top-down. It's a bidirectional system. And what you want to think about polyvagal theory as the neurophysiology of a mind-body or brain-body medicine or brain-body science, because it enables both the viscera to communicate with the brain and the brain to communicate with the viscera. And that's really what the polyvagal theory is about. It's about talking about the brainstem structures that regulate your body. But those brainstem structures are also sensors or receptive to all forms of, we use the term energy within this constituency. The energy can come from within the body or it can come from outside the body, but the body's going to respond to it. And that transmitted upstairs to our higher brain structures, and then we try to make sense out of it.
Um, right. Yes, it is right. It's part. It's. I think your according to your works about 80% up, 20% down. Right, more or less.
Yeah, but with that, you have to think about the importance of the vagus as being a cranial nerve which means it comes off the brain, but it goes down into the body. So it's a direct wiring between your viscera and the brain. But 80% of the fibers happen to be sensory, and they are major, major mediators of how you feel and how you think. They basically are regulators of the portals that enable cognitive and other forms of emotional and intellectual, cognitive, and even spiritual experiences to occur. So we want to think in terms of the communication between body and higher levels of the brain. Some of those areas are outside of awareness. Some are part of our consciousness, but it's bidirectional. And I guess the other feature that you might want to think about in terms of polyvagal theory is that it articulates that there are basically three major physiological states that mammals go into, and we're mammals. And we really are on a personal quest to be in a safe state. And safe state is not merely the removal of danger in the environment, but it's a sensing of cues of safety.
Right. So the thing I think that I take from your work that was such a revelation to me, at least, was this idea that the sense of safety comes kind of from inside down low. It's not
Mm.
verbal. I mean, you either you
Yeah.
feel safe and then maybe you
Mm.
put words on it.
And,
Uh,
s- and sometimes the words are not accurate. And sometimes we put words of safety when our body's in a state of terror. What it really means is that our syntax, the language we use, doesn't really represent our bodily feelings. But that's quite obvious to any one of us who deal with any clinical population or any social relationship. We know the words aren't always conveying the feelings.
right.
Uh, but the feelings are really a rapid transmission of your visceral state, and your visceral state is not only responding to your digestive processes, it's also picking up cues in the environment that are signaling the body. Can you give up the hypervigilance?
Right.
Can you be feeling safe? Can you be in the arms of another? And of course, when you work with trauma or any really severe disorder, what is the major feature of these people? Difficulty in creating close relationships because
Right.
their bodies are still detecting something dangerous, even if you tell them they're safe. Their
Right.
body says, no, I'm not safe.
So maybe that's a great segue in with energy psychology. One of the things that people that practice these approaches find all the time is you do this kind of strange, one of these semi-strange procedures where the person focuses on
Mm-hmm.
something traumatic. They maybe tap on meridian points, and in rapid time with that, in a way that makes no sense at all of a sudden the person feels better. I mean, they feel this sense of relief leaving them,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have other thoughts about it and other
Right.
awarenesses. Um, and for me, that one of the things I think about is, well, perhaps that's happening because it's deactivating or
Mm-hmm.
sending cues via the polyvagal system.
Oh, it has to be, but let's kind of do a partitioning here.
Okay.
Part of one of the vulnerabilities of any type of science is that it tries to move very much into a mechanistic concept. So it basically is making energy medicine into medicine, or energy psychology into medicine.
Right.
It's treating it as a deterministic model. And when you do things like that, you miss the major importance of a lot of the person-to-person interaction, the therapist to client, the person-to-person.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our body is looking for. Our body is looking for the features of the other person that enable our bodies to feel relaxed. Now, various clinical features of energy psychology deal with a lot of person-to-person. You're touching if you touch, or if you're not a touching method, you're going into proximity. But our nervous system is responsive to proximity. And for any of these methods to be functionally useful, the moving into proximity has to trigger a sense of calmness in the other. Mm-hmm. Because if it triggers a sense of defensiveness, it's not going to be very helpful.
Well, that's interesting, because I recently just wrote a blog about this, that I was teaching a workshop, and I was having people practice EFT. And the therapist who was practicing, they called me over, and it was a perfect setup, but she was clearly, the therapist was scared to death to do this work with this person. I mean, it wasn't that obvious, right? Yeah. But so what I ended up writing about was that these approaches that when you've done them a few times and you see that they work, you calm down. You know there's a high probability that you can handle this. And so maybe now, as I'm listening to you, say, well, perhaps the issue here is that there are subtle cues that are picked up in my voice, if I'm the therapist, and my proximity, and how I handle your response. And I communicate to you in these nonverbal ways, above and beyond the actual procedure. You're gonna be fine.
Right. And remember, if you, in a sense, unpack what you said, the client's response is changing the therapist. So if the therapist goes into this with an expectation of being helpful, the client gets that. But if the therapist is also a little bit anxious about it, if the client starts to respond back, the client is sending cues to the therapist to create the dyad. Right. And it's that reciprocal relationship which has tremendous health-giving properties. So mammals, and again, I keep emphasizing that we are a mammal. We cannot regulate ourselves in isolation. Everything has to do with co-regulation, or what we might also call symbiotic regulation, or synchronous symbiotic co-regulation. So in a therapeutic setting, there is this interaction occurring.
Well, I really like what you're saying. I mean, and enacting about this, it's not mechanistic, and I think most of us would agree with that. But I do also think that some of us are curious about the mechanisms. For instance, I know part of, I was mentioning to you earlier that thought field therapy did some research a while back in the I think it was 2000s, and was published where they would, again, people would have trauma, and they measured their heart rate variability. And then they did some tapping on them, and the trauma, where the person reports all the trauma gone. And then they remeasure their heart rate variability, and their heart rate variability improves. And one of the things that you've talked about is that heart rate variability essentially is a measure of the health of the vagal braking system. Ergo, it suggests to me, at least, again, even if we take aside that maybe it's a little too mechanical, that perhaps what's happening when we're tapping on folks, or whatever it is that we're doing, we're helping down-regulate this sense of vulnerability.
Yeah, it doesn't mean there isn't a mechanism. It's just you shouldn't treat the organism as a machine. Right. That's all. So it's not like you can, in a sense, totally manualize certain types of therapies. Agreed. Because you need to maintain the dyad. The dyad's critical. Now, the raising of heart rate variability is an indicator of the newer mammalian myelinated vagal circuit, which is part of your social engagement circuit. As long as that starts working well, it downregulates the defense systems. So your interpretation is absolutely right. It triggers, in a sense, this ability now to spontaneously engage, which is really part of the agenda or objective of the therapies, and it's a good physiological indicator. But another observational measure that therapists can get is merely looking at the upper part of the face. So if the eyes become more exuberant, you start seeing crinkles, the upper part of the face is, in a sense, conveying information, and the voice becomes more prosodic,
Right.
then it's the same system. In the brainstem, the regulation of those muscles are linked to the regulation of the vagal control heart, giving you heart rate variability. And the vocalizations, where you have prosodic intonation and voice, so it's not syntax, it's really the mood that's being conveyed, is all regulated by another vagal nerve called the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which is a vagal nerve, so it's mirroring your physiology is in how you speak. Now, as a therapist, this is as important as looking at a client. The therapist is conveying their physiological state to their client. And if they talk in a voice that's not prosodic, not warm, not conveying warmth, the other individual's body will tighten up because the person's not going to be detected as safe. And I actually coined this word neuroception because it's not perception. Your body is responding outside the realm of awareness to certain cues.
Right.
Those cues are actually identifiable and predictable. So prosodic voice is important, use of the upper part of the face, gesture with the hands, things so that a good therapist would do. They're really signaling the client that the client's safe in their presence.
So this is the I like to talk about, why in hypnosis you're always having this sing-songy, very prosodic voice that says, you're going to be relaxed and easy, and it has that kind of melodic quality to it. How Albert Ellis ever, got anything done, I have no idea, but with that voice tone, but
yeah.
Maybe in New York it works. I don't know. So, okay. So I'm wondering, so you're going to be talking about this idea of safety and how to help people achieve that. Maybe you could say a few more words about that.
Okay, so for our body to function, and this is again derivative of the polyvagal theory, it basically says you have three separate neural circuits that evolve phylogenetically to regulate your autonomic nervous system. And these systems are hierarchically organized, and that's a lot of words to say something very simple. Basically saying if you feel safe, then your sympathetic nervous system and your old vagal circuit can play a dance of homeostasis, and you will heal, you will grow, you'll restore yourself, you'll be a happy camper. But if your body doesn't detect features of safety, then you become vulnerable to fight, flight, to mobilize with defense. And when you study people with trauma, fight, flight wasn't successful. They immobilized. So they were basically like death feigning or dissociating. And what we learn is that people who go into that latter state, it's very difficult for them to, in a sense, transition into a more social behavior. So even though we evolved to very rapidly move from fight, flight, mobilization to social behavior because we needed to detect safety, we did not evolve very efficiently to move out of the shutting down response.
Right. Something you said earlier, you were talking about that you might think you're safe, and yet you're not. This sounds to me like one of the things that that are certainly discussed in the energy community often, that people will be seemingly functioning, and yet stuff shows up. And one of the ideas of tapping on a variety of problems, even though they're not necessarily obviously bothering you, is it helps deepen, if you will, hidden pockets of trauma, hidden pockets of activation that you're not even aware that you have.
There's a lot in our, in terms of how we have evolved culturally within our own society, and that is we become a species that uses a personal narrative to describe whatever pathology they've incorporated into their personality. So we are very syntax oriented. We think words carry everything. We think in terms of education, it's all cognitive. We minimize the importance of play. We minimize the importance of social interaction. We, in a sense, are totally in the world that Descartes helped structure for us. We try to minimize the importance of bodily feelings so that we can succeed with our higher level
So our so-called higher level, right?
Right,
Right, right,
exactly, sarcastically,
right, 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 right,
appropriately sarcastic.
right, right, right.
But I always say, what if Descartes was misinterpreted? What if he didn't say, je suis donc, I should say, je pense donc je suis, I think therefore I am. What if he said, je me sens donc je suis, I feel my body, I feel myself, therefore I am. And I use the word je me sens, which is to feel, but in the reflexive form. We don't even have that in English. So it's feel myself, feel my body. The word feel for us is both feeling outside of us, and then we have to qualify and say, I'm feeling something inside. But the French have a word for it, and that is feeling internal state. If Descartes said, when you feel internal state, then you are, life would be very, very different, or at least our culture would be. And I think the products, in a sense, the products who come into therapy, meaning the people who have lived the lives that they're living, is that they're really in situations where they're rejecting the sensory impact, the sensory feedback from their body that is going up to their brain. They just want to reject it. They don't want to feel bad. So they just try to block it. And as you block that information, and this is part of, I think, the metaphor under much of energy psychology and energy treatments, is there's a blockage of feedback, a blockage of sensory information. Whether you call it chakras or whether you call it whatever thing you want to call it, it's really the same issue, that the information is not coming up in a comfortable, flowing way that the higher level aspects of your nervous system can make sense of it.
You've sort of just blown my mind a little bit.
Sing me a song there.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I guess then, and maybe we can just end on this note, that the theme of the conference has to do, and you've touched on it so nicely, actually. I don't know if you intended to or not. That of if a path with heart, integrating effective tools with authenticity and presence. So
Yeah.
that again, yes, there's a tool involved, and you need to be present with yourself. You have to be tuned in. You have to feel the interoceptively. You need to be tuned in with the other, and you can't really reduce. It sounds like you're taking the perspective as it's a both and. You need both.
Yeah, but what you really brought up is, in the sense, you have to be present with yourself. So you have to totally be present. And you can't, in a sense, deny the feelings of your own body. And I think so much of our acculturation is a denial of our own feelings. Even the structures of classrooms where people have to sit still, the idea of lectures where people can't talk, the denial of the natural co-regulation strategies that we as mammals have. We like to talk and we like to interact with each other, but so much of our days are structured where this is viewed as inappropriate.
Well, I'm looking forward to your keynote, which now I'm thinking like, oh gosh, maybe we should have it more co-regulated and not have it as a keynote. But I don't know how we're going to do that. Maybe we'll come up with some interesting ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But this has been great. Thank you very much. I think your people should read your book. If you're working with trauma, you need to read Polyvagal Theory. Not light reading, but
if
really
you're an insomniac, it helps a lot. Yeah.
But really good reading.
The good news is I'm working on a book that is readable. Okay.
Oh, great. Fantastic. All right, well, thanks, Steve. We'll see you in a few months.
Great. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your meeting. Bye.
Great. Bye.